All right. Welcome to episode 10 of the Benchwarmers Perspective. This week, I am here with none other than Andy Roberts. You're with the White Lake Mirror, correct? And the
Yes.
Oceana Echo.
Yeah, Echo Publishing is our
Yep.
parent corporation,
Yep.
but yeah, I'm basically in charge of the White Lake Mirror.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about what you do now as kind of, I know you used to work for Shoreline, correct?
Yeah.
And now what you're kind of doing. I know you guys just went to a nonprofit, which is awesome. And just kind of explain a little bit of that.
Sure. Well, luckily, the nonprofit part is stuff that's usually handled by other folks I work
Yep.
with. But yeah, I'm basically just in charge of content for the White Lake Mirror.
Yep.
It's covering meetings, keeping track of the news, and obviously I've been doing sports forever, so that's kind of my baby.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of
Yeah.
that as well.
Yeah. So kind of explain to me your career, like how you got there, what made you want to kind of get into this in the first place and where it kind of all originated from.
Sure. Well, it really is all I've ever wanted to do, and I think I've talked with 100 people about it too. Is that if you can see yourself doing anything else other than this, it's probably not something you should do because you really have to be all in.
Yeah.
And this is all my mom told me in like 8th grade or 7th grade that I should do this because I have a mind for it and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have any idea before that what I was going to do with my life. So I decided, yeah, let's do this. And dove in, everything I did after that was to try and get here. I went to Ball State University for telecommunications. The original idea was to get on TV and radio, but that wasn't going as well as I wanted to. So I started pivoting more to print while I was there. And luckily that it all ended up leading me here. It was just a random careerbuilder.com ad that I ran across for a job up here. And I've been here ever since, and I certainly don't ever want to leave.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned, kind of print. How much has that changed in your time, here and all that?
Since I've been here, it honestly hasn't changed that much.
Yep.
I think print was, a little less of the focus before I started doing it for a living. But yeah, ever since here, it's been. There's obviously a lot more online. It started towards the end of my time at Shoreline. I was focusing a lot more on getting stories up on the internet, getting pictures out on social media so people could click on them and like them and all that stuff. And it's the same case now with the White Lake Mirror. So it's less. It's print is still the core of what we do. And I think that will, for the smaller publications, will always be the case to some extent, but you definitely have to supplement it with the online, and obviously you guys do a lot of that here as well. So you know how that goes.
Yeah. So social media is a huge aspect of that, as you mentioned. How do you use social media to promote your print in a way? Kind of explain to me how you guys at the Echo and Mirror do that.
We're still working out the kinks of it, honestly, But I've gotten into posting a lot of videos. They're short ones because my phone is only so big.
Yeah.
But getting video up and posting it to the Facebooks and the Twitters and all that, and getting links out. Links is big because I think you got to get people to click on your website. It's not going to help any business for someone to look at your Facebook page. That much. You need to get them on your website so they can see the whole picture of what you guys do.
Yeah. So diving a little bit deeper into the Mirror. So what kind of area? What's your coverage area? I guess for the Mirror. Like who do you cover exactly?
I cover Whitehall, Montague, and Reese Puffer school districts, and basically the surrounding areas. So it goes from basically Dalton Township on the southern end to Rothbury and Grant Township on the northern end.
So tell me a little bit about your time at Shoreline, because you were there for a long time. That's kind of where people, from what I see at least, where a lot of people knew you from. Tell me a little bit about your time, how impacted your career and how it helped you kind of grow.
Well, it was great. I worked for two really great editors when I first started, Greg Means and Andrew Skinner, and they did a ton to help me get better and improve at what I was doing. I told the story in my last Beacon issue, but the first football game I ever covered at Whitehall, it was week 3. I had covered Montague the first 2 weeks. But it was the first Whitehall game I'd ever covered. I'd been here for 4 months, I think, at that point. And when I started walking around the sidelines during the game, the student section started yelling at me, yelling my name, and I'm like, holy cow, how do these people know me already? But I was just very impressed by that, and it just this place really seems to throw its arms around its local sports, and I really have loved that during the time there. But yeah, I mean, it was just getting better at what I was doing and working with some really great people, and I was lucky to be able to develop my skills that way. And over time, I've taken on more responsibilities, and I'd like to think I'm okay at that, but but I think it's always a growing process when you're in this business.
Yeah. So, kind of tell me about your most memorable moments. So you just mentioned being at Whitehall, and kind of like what when you think of your career in a nutshell, I guess, what are the most memorable moments in that so far?
Well, you always start with the deepest runs a team has made. Obviously, Montague football got to Ford Field a couple of times, and I was able to cover those games, and that was outstanding. It was certainly a kind of surreal moment in 2020 when the COVID season, when Montague won the championship in January, with no one in the stands. It was kind of that was a weird night. Certainly one of the more memorable games I remember is Whitehall in 2014, I think it was. They were in the playoffs against Comstock Park in the second round, district championship. They were losing 30-7, and we were on the sidelines. The media folks were like, "This is gonna be a running clock. This is horrible. This is a terrible ending." Whitehall somehow rallies to win that game 41-36. One of the greatest games I've ever seen. That's one that always jumps to mind. Montague against North Point Christian the following season when they were 10-0, I think, and that was a district championship, and I think North Point ended up winning by a touchdown, and that was a crazy game. Montague I think was down 2 scores and rallied to make it really close. So those were two of the ones that jump out to me. But there are a ton of great ones. Montague softball made the final.
Quick break from the action to thank our sponsor. Meraki Performance is a leader in performance coaching. Whether you're looking to motivate your business or your athletic team, Meraki Performance can help. Check them out at merakiperform.com.
Football made a couple great runs early in my career here. There's a ton of them. I mean, it's awesome. It's just there's something different every year almost. Hart track and field, girls track and field won a state championship in 2022. Montague girls golf in 20 and 21. I mean, almost every sport has provided some great moment or another in the time I've been here.
So anybody who follows your Facebook page would know you're a huge Notre Dame fan.
Right.
So kind of, how did you become a fan of them? Not a ton of people around here are huge Notre Dame fans. How did you kind of become a fan of theirs?
My mother grew up within walking distance of the campus, and she went to Purdue, but she was still a huge Notre Dame fan. That was I've got a lot of sports allegiances, as anyone who follows my Twitter can attest. But that was the only one I had no choice in because she didn't give me one. It was, you were going to be a Notre Dame fan. That's it. And that I think because of that is why I care more about them than the other teams that I have. But that's it's a short story.
Both
sides of the family actually were Notre Dame fans all the way down the line. But my mom was the big one.
Yeah, it's kind of like growing up. If you weren't an MSU fan, you're not allowed here.
Right.
Like that's kind of how I completely understand where you're coming from. So big season for them kind of going on right now. They're kind of in range of maybe a playoff berth possibly.
It's so strange, this 12-team system. You almost have to recalibrate everything, the way you followed college football your whole life, because any other year you lose to Northern Illinois. And that's it. There's no way anyone's coming back from that. But because there's a 12-team playoff, and because Notre Dame is blessed to have a decent amount of talent and have gotten better since that loss, that suddenly they're not out of it yet. They can win all the rest of their games and get the number 8 seed or whatever. And it's just such a weird talking about number 8 seeds and getting in with the loss to Northern Illinois. It's such a different world now in college football, and I'm not sure yet how I feel about it, but it's definitely interesting.
So if they do make it, how pumped are you going to be?
Well, they've gotten hit so hard with injuries, so I think at this point, just getting there would be a win. I mean, they just lost their best defensive player probably to a season-ending injury, and they already lost 2 defensive linemen and 3 offensive linemen to season-ending injuries. So I think just getting to the playoff at all, given all that they're dealing with, would be a win. And beyond that, I don't really have any expectations.
No, it would be awesome to see him get there. It's been a while. I mean, Vanderbilt taking that game a few weeks ago, and then what was it? 4 top 10 teams all lost last week.
5 in the top 11 the week before last, and 4 of those were to unranked opponents. So it was a wild week.
So kind of going back to the sports journalism stuff, how do you see it evolving in the next, coming years, in the next 5 to 10 years?
I wish that I were better at figuring stuff like that out, because if I were, I would just go to the stock market and win money on that. But I'd like to think that what is going on now is what's going to be going on for a while. Like I said earlier, I think these smaller papers where, not to put a fine point on it, but the big corporations, there's no money to be made really by eating up these smaller communities' papers, because there's just not that much money in the area. So that's why I think that the smaller ones, like the Mirror, like whatever else you want to say, can survive, because they don't need to make a lot of money. They just need to stay solvent and sustainable, and there is enough money there, hopefully, for that to happen. So I do think that as long as people who are in charge understand that going in, that you can do this, you're not going to be a millionaire or a billionaire or whatever by covering news in the Whitehall Montague area. It's a great area. It's just not going to make you $1 million by covering those things. You just have to settle for decent revenue. And I think if people understand that and accept that, then the field will do pretty well in terms of the small papers. In terms of the bigger picture, the big cities, that I have no idea, and I couldn't begin to guess. But I'd like to think, the people like what we do and what you guys do will be just fine, because they're okay with the fact that you're not going to take over the world from Whitehall or Montague or Hart or Shelby or whatever.
Yeah, like it was something I've noticed, and something that we've really been hitting hard in recent months has been social media. Just the amount of viewership that's on social media, and then using that, like you said earlier, to redirect eyes towards your website, towards your other content. That's been, I mean, there's so much viewership on those platforms. It's insane. Almost everybody has a Facebook account that's over 13, right? So then and then on Instagram, you got your kids who are like, oh, I'm on the thing, right? And they go and share that, and I think it's going to go towards social media big, where it's the quick hitters. It's the like, hey, I'm scrolling through TikTok and see stuff. I mean, we've had insane viewership growth on TikTok, which is funny to me, but and we're just posting, dumb TikToks. So you got kids in here for a media day. Let's have them make a TikTok while they're at the media day. And I'll be honest, the cross country one that they made absolutely no sense, and also had like 10,000 views. So I can't complain. It made no sense, but it got views. So that's kind of the direction I see it growing towards social media a little bit more. But I do agree with you. I think the smaller papers like you guys, kind of like us, that, have the really solid viewership in the Whitehall, Montague, Muskegon areas, maybe even Oceana County, are going to continue to be able to survive just on, the small, just because there's the bigger places or bigger publications aren't coming to take that viewership, because there's just not a lot of viewership here to take, right? There's not a lot for them to say, oh, well, we'll come in there and we'll make $50,000 off the people that are there, because that's not going to happen. Right.
And I noticed when they launched the Oceana Echo, that was before I came over, but it was almost immediate how people flocked to them because they know those people. All those people had been covering news here forever already.
At this moment, we would like to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Park Place Sports. Want to support your local athletics program? Look no further than Park Place Sports. As a leader in banner and sponsorship program for athletes, they provide top-notch services to help your team shine. Visit their Facebook page, Park Place Sports, LLC, and see how they can elevate your athletic program today. Park Place Sports, your partner in athletic excellence.
So you won't get that in a Chicago. It's too fragmented. But when there's not that many news sources in the first place, and I think this goes back before I even got here, when the Muskegon Chronicle, which used to be kind of a powerhouse publication around here, that when they started pulling back from covering things that were outside the immediate Muskegon area, I think that's what paved the way for people like the Echo to be the prime news source for people who live up there, because no one else is covering them. So someone's got to, and that's what's happened up there, and that's what we're building, hopefully, in the White Lake area too.
Yeah, I have kind of a question for you that might be, you might not have an answer to. How do you expand a coverage area, right? So thinking, recently we expanded to a little bit more south. So we're getting Reese Puffer, we're getting Spring Lake, Fruitport, those schools. How do you expand a coverage area while also keeping content the same level? Do you know what I mean? So say we're covering Whitehall Montague, right? We're producing this amount of content at this level. How do you also do that and expand your coverage area with the same amount of people?
I guess you have to have more people, right?
Yeah.
You pretty much have to have more people. I mean, it's physically impossible to add more people, more workload to one person and get the same quality of work. It's just not going to happen. We're all human. We have limitations. So I think it comes down to more people. If you have enough people, enough quality people doing quality work, then you can pull it off. Otherwise, I think anyone, and this is just speaking globally, not to you guys or anyone else, but anyone trying to produce quality work needs to have enough people to do it. Otherwise, you're physically not going to be able to do it.
Yeah, that was kind of a question when we were originally planning everything for this year. That was a question we had, is how do we expand to get more viewers, but also try and keep the viewers we have here and keep the quality content that we produce. So going forward, what's next for you?
Hopefully this for a very long time. I said before, I never want to leave this place. I'd never heard of it before I came here. But it's become home to me. I've got, we've got two boys now that go to Montague schools. I don't want any of it to change. I would love to stay here until I retire. I said that about Shoreline, and that didn't work out the way I wanted it to at the time. But I want to stay here in the White Lake area because it's comfortable here. It's home. People are warm. They're giving. They're supportive. I mean, I've always been very impressed with the atmosphere here. And I certainly want to stay here. So, if the White Lake Mirror can take off and be what I do until I'm done, I would love that. I know. I know that you can't really look past the end of your nose in this business. Making plans like that, but if I had pie in the sky hopes, that would be what it was.
So big picture stuff. If somebody wants to support the Mirror, support the Echo, how would they go about doing that? Now that you guys are the 501(c)(3) or 501(c)(3)?
501(c)(3). That's the only one I've heard. I've heard of there's like a 501(c)(h) or something. I'm not sure.
There's a couple. There's like 4 of them.
I don't know what makes all the numbers different, but we have. I have it pinned to the top of my Facebook if someone wants to find it. But we have a PayPal link where people can donate to our coverage. Certainly. Anyone can call our office. I don't remember the phone number off the top of my head, but it's in the Echo every week, and get in touch with us. We offer paid subscriptions to if people are outside. I should probably have prefaced that with, we do deliver for free to the Montague area and Oceana County. I think like 95% of Oceana County. There's a couple of random outlying areas that don't get it. But it's those places, and then I also drop copies to several local businesses around here in Whitehall and Montague. But if someone outside those postal delivery areas wants to get it delivered to their door, we offer paid subscriptions, and we have an issue page. I don't know how much you or the listeners might know about issue, but it's issuu.org or com. I can't remember now. But we have a page there where all our issues are posted for free to read online, and it's slow growing, but I hope that it's growing.
Yeah, and I see it growing. It's been pretty awesome to see you guys kind of grow alongside with us. It's been over the last 5-6 months, Sportsnet, at least for us, has grown exponentially. And it's been awesome to be able to see now that I before was outside of it, but now inside of it a little bit more, a lot of it more. Yeah. So how do you think, like, if there was one thing you could cover continuously, like one sport, what would it be?
One sport? Ooh, that's a tough one. I'm just trying to think. I'm not, off the top of my head now, I'm thinking in terms of photos, because photography is something I have had to pick up and get better at since I arrived here.
Me too.
I know wrestling is probably I feel like it's maybe the easiest sport to take pictures of, just because the action is contained. It's all in that ring. So as long as you got it in focus, you're going to get good pictures. I know basketball is a lot of fun. It's a very long season, and but it always feels like there's nice storylines that develop over the course of a basketball season. Obviously everyone loves football, so you always kind of lead with football. Track and field is oddly kind of interesting to me. I know that's not top of mind for a lot of people, but there's so much going on at a meet, so you can always find something. It's honestly almost every sport offers something. Before I got here, all I did was football and basketball. I was freelancing at a paper in Northeast Indiana, doing football and basketball. So I had never done any of the other sports really, but I've really grown to appreciate the other ones as well. But I think wrestling's probably the one that I've grown to appreciate the most, just because I knew almost nothing about it before I started covering it, and now I still don't really understand it all the time. Yeah. But I think I've got the major parts down, and because of the fact that it's so relatively easy to take pictures of, I think that's probably part of why I'm going to appreciate it a lot more too.
So how important do you think the photography aspect is of it? I know that over time it's been something that I've grown to appreciate a little bit more. Now, photography lovers are going to hate me for saying this, but I use all the auto settings on my camera because I'm not good enough to be able to mess with aperture and ISO and all that. It won't look as good. So I just throw it on auto. But how important is, like, have you seen that in your, content and stuff like that, photos?
I think it's vital. I mean, you get down to the core of it. A lot of our business is parents want to see their kids' pictures in the paper. You don't want to simplify it too much, but a lot of it is that people want to see their kids, their nephews, their neighbors, whatever. They want to see them in the paper for excelling, and a big part of that is getting pictures. And it's for me, and I agree with you in that I twiddle a little bit with the settings just for lighting is the only thing. But I was not trained as a photographer. I had to pick it up as I went, and to this day, I think a lot of, in terms of my photography, is just get the camera pointed in the general direction of where you need to be.
Hope it's not blurry.
And you'll get something good eventually. But it's photography is so important to what we do.
And that's what I found too, is that a lot of people, they come to CatchMark SportsNet, or they go to our Facebook page because their kid had a picture on there. And some of our biggest posts have been just because some big player was on there, or maybe a James Young or something like that was on there, and people at Muskegon love their football, and so they come and view that. Question for you, because I've been really curious, and this is something that I've personally struggled with. How do you find the ad hoc kind of stories? Like, this kid just got off an injury, that stuff. With such a big coverage area, how do you find that?
A lot of it is, and this is going to be journalism 101, boring kind of thing, but a lot of it is knowing the people that will tell you that these things are happening. I mean, I don't hear about a lot of these things when they happen. It's right before they happen, or it's right after they happen. Someone tells me, and then I'm able to follow up with that and get in touch with the people that I need to get information. I think one good example is just last week, Mason Molnix from Whitehall, who missed a lot of this soccer season with a broken hip. Came off the bench against Oak Ridge in the pre-district, scored 2 goals in overtime. I didn't know he was going to play going into that game.
Yeah.
I mean, they introduced him before the game. I think he was wearing regular shorts and sneakers. So I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, well, he's dressed, but he's not going to play. And then all of a sudden he's out in the field scoring 2 goals. And, I don't think I'd noticed he had come in until he scored and they said his name. I'm like, holy cow, that actually happened.
Yeah.
So, scrap all your plans. We gotta chase down the coach, chase him down, talk about this, talk about that. Yeah, so much of it is just, if you're just generally aware of what's going on, you'll probably pick stuff up, and it's knowing the people. I mean, it's like people who have passed stuff on to me probably don't realize how important that they are because, like I said earlier, humans have limitations. I physically can't know everything because I can't be everywhere. But if you know the people that will tell you, then you'll be in like Flint, as they say.
Yeah. I'm just curious because that's something that we're trying to grow a little bit more, and it's something that Scott, when he was here, was really, really good at, was finding those stories. And I had never done journalism or done much of that. I mean, a little bit for SportsNet, but not a lot before this. And so now coming into it, I'm trying to figure out, how do you do that? How do you make that manageable, and how do you make that sustainable in a way? And how do you find those stories and then write great stories about them? And that's been a struggle for me to find, and for me to be able to continuously have a good stream of that. And I think part of that is just because I don't have as big of a network as Scott had,
right?
In a way, which is
and how
tough.
Could you?
Right.
You haven't been around 30 years like he has.
Yeah, and getting that network and building that has been helpful. I mean, I have over the last 4 months that I've been doing this, but it's not as big as where it needs to be able to find more of those stories, right? So going into what does your day look like throughout a day for you, working for the Mirror and, going to a sporting event?
Oh, it's, you wake up, get ready, go find results, or luckily a lot of coaches have emailed me results and stats and stuff, and it's just throwing all that stuff together. And luckily our website only launched, what was it, a month ago, 5-6 weeks ago. So this is just become a thing. But getting those stuff up on the website so people can read it, writing it up, getting it ready to go, making photos. If I covered something yesterday, making those photos, getting them up and pushing those out to Facebook. Yep. It's busy, and then keeping track of everything else. I obviously, like I said, I have kids that go to school, so I have to balance my life around them a little bit too. And then, of course, depending on when the sporting event is, tonight it's soccer at 7 p.m. Some nights it's a volleyball tri-meet that starts at 5:30. It can make for very long days. I mean, I remember I've gone to the state cross country meet in Brooklyn a few times. Because that was when Hart was making their runs, and boy, do those make for long days.
I've been there.
Getting up at 5:45 so that you could get there for the early races, and then you're there until 2 p.m. or whatever, and then coming back and you're not home until 7 or 8. So those are long days. But and that's, I've said before that to other people that's really why I love the job too. Because a lot of people have jobs where they are mostly at their computers, in their office or whatever for 6 or 7 hours out of their 8 hours a day. I don't feel like I work well under those situations. I like that something different happens almost every day, that it's almost a new adventure. Yeah.
And honestly, I think that's one of my favorite parts about it too, is I don't have to, when I was doing tech support, love tech support, huge nerd, love doing the, getting into the nitty gritty of servers and desktops and managing all that. But at the same time, it gets boring after you do it for a year, or for me, more than a few years, right? Because it's the same thing. Issue comes in, you fix it, you move on about your day. For me, I like the fact that I get to not be at my desk, and like tomorrow or tonight, I'm going to Reese Puffer for their game tonight, or not Reese Puffer, sorry, it's West Michigan Christian for the district games. Reese Puffer tomorrow for their game. So just being able to get out and not be stuck in the office all day is really one of the most rewarding things I think of it. something you spoke on was work-life balance. How do you balance doing that and, home, I guess?
When you have a family, it's a lot of it is understanding families.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank God my wife has always, been 100% behind me and is happy to pick up more of the slack than she probably should at home, especially and as well as I do, this is one of our busier sports weeks of the year between district soccer, volleyball, football still going on, cross country still going on, everything's happening all at once.
Yeah.
So luckily for some of us, I don't know your situation is, but I'm assuming you don't have a family. I don't think.
Not yet, but
you have to take care of. But it's a lot easier when you're younger and don't have those responsibilities. But it's not easy then either. It's just time management. But when you've got people that you have to answer to, for lack of a better word, at home, it's a lot of it is just making sure they know in advance that there are going to be weeks where it's going to be rough.
Yeah.
And this is one of those weeks, and but we'll make up for it in the back end eventually, hopefully, possibly.
Yeah, Christmas break, one of those.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
I tell you right now, I already have my PTO taken for Christmas break, so there ain't no way they're getting me for Christmas break. Other than I think there's a few holiday tournaments I might go to, but outside of that, no. What I found is that when that time comes that you do get that time away, utilize it to the best of your ability, right? Like when I'm at home on a Sunday, usually because there's never really any sports on Sunday.
Never anything on Sunday. Yeah.
I'm relaxing. I'm not going to do much, and at that point, it's just I'm home, right? Like I'm present in a way for the relationships that I have there and stuff.
At this moment, we'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Chris Wank, Century 21 First Class Realty. Looking to sell or purchase a new home? Or perhaps invest in a plot of land? Chris Wank with Century 21 First Class Realty is your go-to expert. As a leader in West Michigan real estate, Chris brings unparalleled knowledge and dedication to every transaction. Don't wait. Call Chris Wank today at 616-414-5420 and take the first step towards your real estate dreams. Century 21 First Class Realty, your trusted partner in West Michigan property.
How do you, outside of, just doing the sports coverage stuff, what do you like to do outside of that? I think a lot of people know you for your sports coverage, and not a lot of people know the actual Andy Roberts. What do you like to do?
Well, I'd love to say that got a secret, fishing habit or I'm a great, I build Legos or something crazy like that. But what you see is pretty much what you get. If I'm not watching high school sports, I'm probably watching college or pro sports. Yeah. Or, obviously with my kids, we're running around last week and we went apple picking. So it's, all that what am I trying to stereotypical fall stuff or winter stuff or whatever season it is in. But it's pretty much just watching sports or hanging out at home with the family or going out with the family. It's like I said, it's kind of my whole life revolves around that. So like I said, I'd love to say that I've got some great brainy habit, but I really don't. Maybe I should develop one. And if anyone has any ideas, get in touch.
So for me, like when I'm at home, my girlfriend gets mad at me sometimes because I like to, like you said, you don't have that time off a lot, like that downtime. I like to play video games a lot. So I'll go home, and as any 20-year-old probably is doing right now, I'll go home, and that time I'll spend an hour, maybe an hour and a half. I'll get on with a few of the guys here, and we'll play Call of Duty or something for a few hours. But it's the same thing with me. If I'm not doing that, I'm probably either playing basketball somewhere, or I'm going and I'm watching the Lions break each other's legs by accident and possibly take out their best defensive backs entire season. But
not that you're upset about it or anything.
No, I'm not at all. I wasn't at all about that. But I'm the same way, right? And I can tell you that as you know as well as I do, that these next 2 weeks are the busiest weeks of this season, specifically with fall, with the soccer season getting into finals, and then you got volleyball is getting closer to the finals, and they still got their games going on. And then you got cross country, who is running regionals next week, and you've got I can't even think of all the sports. Football has got their last 2 weeks of the season, and it's just like you're kind of everything. Girls golf is playing their finals on Thursday or Friday, Saturday. So yeah, it's busy, definitely busy.
At least fall sports, and this isn't necessarily a suggestion for the MHSAA, but if they want to take it, that's fine. At least fall does not have everything end on literally the same day.
Yeah, yeah.
That first Saturday in June is the worst.
Yeah.
I've called it the hell day because you got everything is ending at once. I mean, for most teams, obviously there's more baseball and softball after that day, but for most teams, it's the end of the day there. Baseball, softball, maybe soccer, maybe girls soccer, track has state.
Yeah.
Everything's ending at once, and boy, oh boy, is that difficult to deal with.
Yeah. So the season that I'm specifically a little nervous about, because like I said, I've never done this. This is my first venture into this, is the winter. Kind of dreading it. The winter is coming. How do you handle the winter with 3 games a week minimum with between boys and girls basketball? And then, the other sports, which is wrestling and indoor track. I don't know if that's big or not. And all that other stuff going on.
In a way, that's almost easier because a lot of it is on the same days. There's not a lot of Monday games. There's a couple here and there, but not a lot. Everything's mostly Tuesday and Friday for basketball and Wednesday for wrestling, cheer, everything else. So that's almost easier because you can almost kind of plan on what you're going to be doing. Whereas, fall, you got stuff happening all the time. Spring, stuff happening all the time.
Yeah.
Rainouts, dealing with that. Yeah, I think in a weird way, winter, even though it's the busiest season, is almost the easiest because it's generally, and
it's got to be playing the best.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed we keep having mild winters and not having snowouts left and right, because we've dealt with that. But as long as the schedule holds, it's actually kind of easy because the stuff all happens when you expect it to.
Yeah. What's the kind of worst weather you've ever had to drive in to get to an event?
Drive in? I have driven through some severe snowouts, major snowouts. Luckily, not once. I ended up on the side of a highway because I skidded off the road after covering. This was before I got here. After covering a girls' basketball game up in the Fort Wayne area, and it was brutal. And I ended up skidding off the road, and thankfully, I'm still here. So nothing bad happened, but. Yeah, there have been some awful days. I've hit enough deer now to last a lifetime.
How many deer have you hit?
Well, I've hit 2 and ruined my car trying to avoid a third. None of them for work since I started here, oddly enough. But But I've learned since then that just drive slow unless someone passes you, and then you just use them as your buffer.
Yeah,
that's my secret tip.
Normally, I have never gotten in a legitimate act. Like never, like I've bumped into like a post or something like that as a teenager driving, like every teenager does. But I've never gotten in an actual accident until last spring. I was going to Walkerville to play basketball, which it's a 45-minute drive. Don't ask me why I was going to play at Walkerville. But I was going to play basketball at Walkerville, and I was on my way there. 3 deer ran. There was a truck coming this way, and I was going this way. I think it's 144th. 3 deer run across, and I saw them, so I slowed down, waited for them to run across, and the truck did too. And I started going, and as soon as I started going, I was not even at probably 15 miles an hour yet. 4th deer runs out, literally runs, and I bump into it. It does a little hop, and then it takes off back out. As it's running back out, it hits the tail end of the truck, busts his light out, and then runs off into the woods. And the guy hit me, and the guy in the truck were like, "What just happened?" My entire front bumper. I was driving a Camry at the time, 2013 Camry, and the entire front beauty cover bumper was just the Toyota logo was busted out. The bumper's hanging out. I'm like, I wasn't even going that fast. How did it break that bad?
You can ask my wife. I have said things about deer that can't be shared in the
Yeah.
stadium because they just drive me insane. Why are you waiting for the 2-ton hunk of moving steel
Yeah.
to be in view before you run across the road? Just wait until there's none of them. It's not that difficult, is it?
Yeah.
But no, here we are.
Yeah. No, man, we were going out to Haunted Acres the other day. My family was, and as we're driving out there, my dad came scarily close to hitting this 8-point buck that came running out of the corn, and he's I'm talking 2 feet from hitting this thing, and yeah, he hit one. My dad hit one when I was growing up, 20 feet from our house and over in Montague, and destroyed the front end of a Buick Enclave that we had just bought. And
I don't know if that's just a Midwest thing. I haven't driven anywhere besides the Midwest, so I don't know. But it seems like it's a lot in this region.
Yeah, no, I hate deer. I see them in the city all the time, and you're just why are you in the middle of the city, right? Why do you go out there?
There's a lot of woods. There's a lot of woods. Just go out there. It's fine.
Yeah. So when I noticed you went to a Notre Dame game the other day.
Yes.
How was that?
Oh, it was great. That's my wife's birthday present to me every year as we go to one game. It was a great game. Louisville was the game I went to. It was close most of the way. Hung on at the end, luckily. Luckily Notre Dame has a pretty good record when we go to my birthday games, mostly because I don't pick the games that they're likely to lose that much.
Yeah.
But there's nothing like I don't think there's anything like a college football for a live game experience. Personally, I've been to a lot of them, luckily.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful.
Yeah. So I'm guessing you're a Lions fan.
I am not. I'm actually
Oh man.
I have nothing against the Lions. I'm pro Lions here. I'm a Carolina Panthers fan, oddly enough.
That might have been worse.
It's much worse right now. I lived in South Carolina from ages 4 to 10, and that was at the time the franchise was born. So I didn't really have a team yet. So I'm like, well, I guess I'm rooting for these guys.
Oh, you might have made a mistake.
I did make a mistake, a horrible mistake.
Yeah.
Especially now. It seems super fun to be a Lions fan right now. Catastrophic injuries to Aiden Hutchinson aside. They're having a great run. What wouldn't you love about that?
We don't know what Carolina's doing down there. I mean,
I don't think they do either.
Yeah. I mean, how do you feel about their season and the direction they're going?
At least they have their draft pick this time. Last year, going 2-15 and knowing they were handing their top pick over to the Chicago Bears was pretty awful. I think at least they have some semblance of an idea now, at least in terms of they know that they're going to be bad. They've had a horrible run of injuries in their own right.
Yeah.
So they're probably going to have a very high draft pick, and at least they have it, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I think they're a few years away, probably.
Yeah. How do you? I mean, I know you're not necessarily a Lions fan, but obviously you're in Michigan, so you kind of got to follow them in a way. How do you feel about the turnaround? I mean, they went 1-6 up until that game in the middle of the season where they flipped it all the way around and ended 7-7. How do you? I think it was more than 7-7. But how do you feel about the Lions and how the way they've turned their kind of organization around completely?
It's been remarkable, really. I mean, when they traded Matthew Stafford for Jared Goff, everyone's like, well, they don't want Jared Goff. He's dunzo. He's a dumpster fire. They just want the draft picks, and I'm sure they did want the draft picks, but man, he's become a legitimate NFL quarterback, which is. I mean, he did go to the Super Bowl in his previous stop once. So it's not like he was total trash. But they've done an incredible job turning him around, and they've got a lot of exciting skill talent on the outside. Yeah. With the two running backs they have, Montgomery and Gibbs.
Yeah, and then
Amon-Ra St. Brown as a receiver, and Sam Laporte. I mean, it's remarkable what they've done. It's and then they're fun to watch. It beats the heck out of a few years ago when if you wanted to watch quality football in Michigan, you had to have a Red Zone or Sunday Ticket or whatever.
Yeah.
At least now I can turn on a game and know that it's going to be good.
Yeah. Did you happen to see what they did to Dallas the other night?
I watched 3 plays of that game.
I hope you watched the three at the end where they
one of them was a touchdown to Jamison Williams
yeah. So Dan Campbell wanted revenge. Let's put it that way. And they tried throwing it. They won the first play of the game that Dan Skipper reported as an eligible receiver because of you remember the situation last year.
For sure.
Yeah, and so he made him report as an eligible receiver. They didn't pass it to him, but he did report. And then they threw who was it? They threw two passes to linemen, and neither one of them ended in a touchdown. One of them was dropped. The other one was caught and it would have been a touchdown, but there was a flag. And then he just didn't, and he ran a flea flicker for a touchdown to Sam Laporta. It was he wanted revenge that day. It was pretty funny, but kind of the thing I like the most is just the difference in culture. And I think in Pistons aside, because nobody knows what's going on over there, but in all of the Detroit sports for the most part has just completely shifted. How do you kind of feel about that?
I think culture's a huge thing. I mean, and you mentioned my unfortunate team, the Panthers. They have a terrible owner, as we all know, David Tepper, and the culture there has been pretty bad for most of the time he's been there. And I think that's top down. I think I don't know a ton about the Lions ownership situation, but as I recall, I think they've had new people kind of take the reins of running the football end of things the last several years, and it's gone really well for them. I think when you've got, and this you could apply this to almost any line of work.
Yeah.
If the people from the top down either know what they're doing or know to get the heck out of the way, so that the people who know what they're doing can do what they do, you'll have a great culture. And the Lions have built that, and I think it's super fun to see. Reason for people around here to care about NFL football. Because for a long time they weren't being given reasons to.
No, it's been. I remember growing up, you were always made fun of when you mentioned you were a Lions fan because nobody wanted. I mean, they were 0-16 at one point. So, you mentioned your future with the mirror. What? How do you see the mirror growing going forward? Let's take another moment to thank our sponsor, Shoreline Restoration and Construction. Did a storm recently hit your business, home, or other building? Then Shoreline Restoration and Construction can help. They are a leader in remodels, new construction, and much, much more. They also restore water-damaged buildings, flooded basement, and so much more.
Well, it's going to come down to people reading it, really. I mean, I still talk to people that haven't seen it. I mean, they say, I've heard good things, but I haven't seen it. So I try to say, it's here. I drop it at XYZ, local business. Please pick it up, check it out. It's online. So I think it's just going to be people seeing it and hopefully enjoying it because, it's stuff that I've been doing for a long time. So, I feel like I have a pretty decent beat on what's happening here and hopefully, other people will pick it up and see that as well.
What are some of your favorite stories to write?
I've gotten a couple of really good features. I know it's cliche to talk about these people dealing with medical issues. Those turn into good ones. I mean, I did one about you several years ago when you had your heart surgery while playing for Montague basketball. But the one that we did about Caden Boyer from the Whitehall lineman who had cancer and recovered from it and got to have a Make-A-Wish experience at the Detroit Lions game, oddly enough, last year was a really great one. Did one about a kid in Shelby who unfortunately had horrible adverse effects from a COVID-19 side effect. I forget what it's called now, the ailment, but he had some horrible effect from COVID-19.
Was it his heart?
He ended up unfortunately, it was horrible. He ended up having his limbs all ended up being amputated. Because I forget what, and MISC, I think it was what it was called. I forget the full name, but it was some horrible adverse effect from COVID-19 that people had been unaware of until it started happening. During the pandemic, and that was it was a good story. Obviously, it was a terrible situation. That I hated to see happen. But it's things like that, people overcoming things. or people or happy stories. Obviously, we're in the media now. We don't want to be in the business of selling negative stories.
Yeah.
We want to try and amplify good things that are happening, and
Yeah.
and things like that. It's when people overcome something and achieve something that they really wanted to achieve,
Yeah.
or just are able to, we write about ribbon cuttings around here. Those are always fun.
Yeah.
People starting new businesses, new chapters of their professional lives.
Mm-hmm.
It's happy stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
we like happy stuff.
Yeah.
Contrary to what a lot of people believe about the media, I think we all would prefer to write about happy stuff.
I would agree with you. Yeah. How did the pandemic kind of affect? I know at the time you were with Shoreline.
Mm-hmm.
How did the pandemic affect you as a reporter?
Well, most functionally, it resulted in the White Lake Beacon office at the time, which is now the Stackowitz Chiropractic office over there on Spring Street.
Yep.
Was closed. They closed that down, and so everyone started working out of the office up in Hart. But we were working from home a lot. It became very difficult to write. At the time, I was only doing sports. Thankfully, I don't know how I would have filled news sections of the paper, because there was just nothing. It was just COVID this, COVID that, and other than that, nothing was happening because nothing was allowed to happen.
Yeah.
I remember that I passed the time almost by coming up with this multi-part series of, these are the most memorable things I've seen since I got here. And at the time I'd been here 8 years, I'm like, that's probably enough time to kind of reminisce and look back. And I dug up one, actually, you mentioned, is one of my favorite stories. One of my favorite stories was during that, and it came from, and this goes back to what I said about just knowing people, and they'll tell you stuff. The Whitehall athletic director at the time, Greg Russell, who's now retired, passed on this wonderful story that I hadn't heard about, that I guess he and Warren Zweigel, the Whitehall baseball coach, were classmates at Mason County Eastern High School in the 80s, and they had their spring seasons canceled, or they had their sports seasons canceled their senior year, because of budget cuts. And so he said, no one thinks adults ever know what kids are going through, but this is one of the times when adults actually did know what kids were going through, because their sports seasons were taken away. And that was one of the great stories that I had a chance to write during the pandemic. And it was just things like that. It was mostly about finding stuff or just making stuff up. I mean, sometimes you just gotta come up with an idea that will fill the space and pursue it to the best of your ability. And boy, oh boy, was the pandemic that time.
Yeah, I mean, it was a weird time for sports. I was in school at the time, in high school, and I very vividly remember, like, it was funny because I had a teacher that told me we were only going to be out for 2 weeks the day that we ended up going out for 2 weeks. And they were like, we'll only be out for 2 weeks, we'll be back. And I was like, I don't think we will.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if we're leaving school for 2 weeks, I don't think we're going. And I said that. And then 2 months later, she's like, well, we were out for a little longer than 2 weeks. So, and then I remember, like, that was supposed to be I was supposed to be playing, the number 1, 2 spot on JV for golf, because it was going to be the first year we had a JV golf team, and possibly pulled up to varsity for golf. And that didn't happen because we got, that happened. And then going into the next year, like you had mentioned, I had my cross country season, which was super successful for us because we went to the state finals that year. And going into the next season, expecting a lot, didn't run great. And then going into basketball season, we had, all the stuff with COVID and the basketball, and Governor Whitmer decided, didn't know if we wanted us to let us play or didn't know if we were going to play
until February.
And we didn't start playing till February, like you said. And then 2 weeks into the season, we had just got cleared to play, and that same night I came back, and then I'm being told I'm having a heart surgery in, a month. And then I had a heart surgery. I basically didn't play sports for most of my junior year until golf season, because I had luckily I gotten cleared to play golf. Now, how well I played golf, not great when your chest is kind of not super strong because it got cut in half.
Sure.
And so you're only hitting the ball off the tee 180 yards and not able to do much, especially when you play at a course like Egypt Valley, that is 7,000 something yards for regionals. And you only hit the ball 180 off the tee. And
Yeah,
so,
that's tough to overcome.
yeah. And so, yeah, that COVID year was wild, especially for me, but for everybody, I think, like, especially for sports. Like, sports just, having to wear a mask while you play basketball.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that in and of itself was hard. I mean, having to wear a mask at school was hard. I remember when they took the mask policy away going into my, it would have been the last 2 months of my junior year, and how happy I was. I was like, because, and the funny thing is, everybody wore them under their nose. Like, nobody
Right.
really wore them. It's
Wore
just
'em correctly.
Yeah. And so you're like half the time I didn't even, like, I just pulled it down under my chin because I'm like, what's the worst that can happen, right? I'm not sick. If I was sick, I wouldn't be here, right? So, yeah. No, I was always curious how that affected you guys as sports writers, because I know at the time we had just started, the whole reason we started SportsNet was because of the COVID stuff with football and people not being able to be there. So we started doing those live streams. And I was always curious how that affected Scott, because that's about when we pulled Scott in to come and do this, how it affected him and how it affects sports writing in general. Because, I mean, it's hard to do sports when everything's closed, right?
Well,
So-
the actual games were fine. Man, it weighed on you mentally, though. I remember when they finally did say you could play basketball in February, and I think it was the first game I went to was at Pentwater, I believe, and it was emotions. I mean, I was like, oh my God, I'm getting to do this again. I mean, that's for a while. It almost did feel like I'm not going to get to do this for a year. I mean, I'm not going to have a job.
Yeah.
And for one, and for two, I'm not going to get to do this again for a while. So just being able to get back to that was so great. And, everything progressed, luckily, better than I think a lot of people anticipated. And by the end of that school year, like you mentioned, things were a little more loose. People were getting vaccinated. The rates were going down. And finally, we were able to have what felt like normalcy again. And that was definitely not something I want to relive. They said it was a once in a century pandemic. Let's make sure it's at least 1 century before that happens again.
Yeah. So kind of dive into that a little bit further. During COVID, when everything was locked down, how do you report on sports when everything's locked down like that? Like, what did you do during that time?
Well, like I said earlier, I came up with the idea to look back at the most memorable. I think it was because I broke it up by school. It would be like 1 week it'd be Whitehall, most memorable games, most memorable athletes that I've seen, and then the next week it'd be Montague, and the next would be Hart, Shelby, Walkerville, whatever. So you got those out there, and it was feature ideas coming up with luckily the one Greg Russell got to me. I can't remember all the ones that we did, but there were definitely more features. I think I wrote more sports columns that year. I sort of decided I was going to be the guy who had takes for a little bit there, just because what else was I going to write about?
Yeah. I've always been curious. I've always wondered if that would be a fun thing to do, is do more takes.
Takes, yeah.
Yeah, like a hot take series, and where you like bring in, like, it's kind of like you record it, and it's kind of like this, where you're in a room and you guys are just talking about these, like, what do the Lions do? Do they trade to try and get a replacement for Aiden Hutchinson, right? Like, stuff like that. But it's hard to do when you're doing high school sports.
Because you can't be like, this is why Muskegon should make a change at quarterback, because you can't come on off the wall with things like that, because you're talking about high school kids. They're amateurs. They're not doing this for a living. They're ostensibly doing this for fun. So you can't be taking shots at people. Whitehall loses a couple games. This is why they need to fire the coach. I mean, you can't do things like that. That's not what the point of any of this is.
That's where I've always been like, it doesn't really work when you're doing high school sports coverage, just because you can't be doing that with high school kids. You can do it with NFL because they're getting paid a bunch of money to do it and stuff like that, but you can't do it when it's high school kids. So, I mean, you mentioned that the Mirror still does print. How do you guys distribute that going out? I know you mentioned your paid subscriptions and stuff like that.
Yeah, those are available. How it works for us, and I had never heard of this before. They started doing it, but they actually the company actually purchased, I guess, postal routes. So they post so they distribute to all the Hart addresses and all the Shelby and the New Era and the Rothbury and the Montague. I think most Montague. I'm not sure all Montague homes get it, but that's just how it goes out. So it goes out through the mail. Luckily, there's a nonprofit mailing rate. There's a whole big thing. I'm not going to bore our audience with the details.
Yeah.
But luckily, that makes it a little cheaper for us to do that. And other than that, we have these extra copies we distribute to businesses, and so people can pick them up. And a couple. Well, people ask to get them delivered to their homes, and before we offer the paids, and so we've been doing that too. It's just getting those postal routes and distributing them out that way. And like I said, they're available online. We publish the links to it on the social media every week, so people can check it out online too if they want to.
Yeah. So my last question, and this is something that has been kind of a challenge for me. How do you handle the criticism or maybe even the negative feedback about your reporting or something like that?
Luckily, that doesn't happen as much. I don't know if people are getting nicer or if they're just...
Yeah, I'm not seeing it happen a ton. I'm just saying it's something that I've had to grow to be able to figure out how to handle, I guess.
And a lot of it, and I got told this once because the first football season I was here, I think I mentioned Montague. I covered their games the first 2 weeks. I think what it was all three, Whitehall, Montague, and Reese Puffer, were all on the road for both of the first 2 weeks. Montague just happened to be the team that was playing closest all 3 weeks, so I just went to do the Montague games. And I don't remember who sent it, so if it was you, I apologize. But someone sent me an email the next week saying, "Does the Beacon know that Whitehall has a football team because you're not covering them?"
Yeah, so those are the comments that I'm talking about.
Right, and I was like, okay, they were far away. I'm not going to drive to Grand Rapids or wherever it was they were playing when there were closer options. But, a lot of it is just you shrug it off. People are, most of the time, they're not doing it to be mean. They're just mad about something and they just need to get it out. So you shrug it off. You understand that, I know things that I know how to do. I'd like to think I know how to do this. You don't have to juggle these things. You don't have to make these decisions. I'm making them. It's going to be okay. I'm going to get to everybody.
Yeah.
So, it's a lot of that. And luckily, like I said, that doesn't happen as much anymore. I don't know if I'm getting better at it or if people just getting nicer, but but you just shrug it off. It's these people don't, and we just spent 40 minutes earlier in this very podcast talking about things that most people don't understand because they're doing other things for a living. They're not doing this. So it's just knowing that you're doing what you can to the best of your ability. I think everyone agrees we're trying to be equitable as best we can. We've got to make decisions sometimes that we would prefer not to make in terms of coverage. I mean, I'd love for it to come out at the end of the year where all three schools I cover get covered exactly equal amount of times, but
or everything's covered all the time
for 100 reasons. That's obviously not possible, but we do the best that we can, and I think to a large extent people understand that now. I think people are getting better at understanding that now, hopefully, but it's just having thick skin. God knows a lot of people in this business deal with worse than you didn't cover my kid's team enough. So I can deal with that once every couple of weeks if that means that if that's the worst of it.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. This was an awesome conversation we had, and I think a lot of people will like it. And I hope upwards and onwards for the Mirror and the Echo, and I hope things continue to go great for you guys. And it's awesome to see you guys grow as an outside media source and get some more coverage for our area. This lovely community we have around us, and I appreciate coming on, and I hope you guys have continue to grow.
We're going to try. Thanks very much. It was a blast.